and welcome back to the Gavilan Hills Vineyard here at Paradise Ranch. We've planted over the last few years about 400 vines, and I want to go over the pruning going from the second year of growth into the third year of growth. If you watched our video last year, you can take a look at it right up here. There was a video that we put out on going from the first year of growth to the second year of growth and the objectives, what we wanted to try to meet with that particular set of pruning for that year going into the second year. Now we've got a small vineyard, as I said, 400 vines, located here in Southern California. Now the problem is we have a very hot, dry climate, except right now in the winter. It's mid to late February. This month has already broken a record for the most rain in February ever recorded. I don't want you, the people who are watching this in cold weather climates, I don't want you to shoot me. But with this bad weather and cold weather we've had, it's today, it's overcast and 65 degrees. Anything below 70 is too cold to go outside. So when you're living in a dry, warm climate like this, 65 degrees sucks. Anything below that sucks. Right now we're sitting at, I think it's 19 inches of rain so far this year. Typically we get 11, 12 inches of rain if it really pushes it. So the last 2 years has been very interesting. Last year we broke a record with the most rain. We had 22 inches of rain last year. This year we're already at 19. We haven't even hit March yet, which is one of the rainiest months. So pruning from going from the second year to the third year, as I mentioned in that video, is the most important thing you can do in your vineyard by far. If you take off too much growth, you can ruin the plant. If you leave too much growth, then you could get a lot of plants growth and very little grape growth. And since this is our third year of growth, we're going to be doing something a little differently in the standard scheme of things. As I said, I want to always look forward. The pruning this year, going into the third year, I want to know what these plants are going to be looking like next year, going into the fourth year. So this year, what we did this past summer was I didn't restrict the growth. I limited the amount of growth on the plants. And what I mean by that is I let them grow. I did what they did what they wanted to do, but I did not allow very many grapes. There was a few grape clusters. We did get 100 pounds of Grenache just to kind of practice and get things under control, but we really limited the amount of growth. Going into this year, we're also going to be limiting the growth on these plants. Now this is their third year of growth. You will start getting grapes in the third year, but what we're going to do is, instead of pruning the grapes, you always want to prune your grapes to have two buds on each spur. You want 2 fruiting buds on each spur. We're going to limit that, and we're going to change that a bit, and we're going to put in only cut to 1 spur. I want one bud, excuse me, let me get this straight. I want 1 bud off of each spur. There's too many terms in grape growing. I want 1 bud off of each spur. Now 1 bud will give me a shoot, and then that 1 shoot will give me 2 clusters. I should have 2 clusters of grapes off that 1 shoot. Typically you would have 4, but I want the plants to spend time growing, getting trunks, getting cordons, and building a root system. So we're going to limit the grapes this year, and then depending on the plant, some of the plants I won't do that next year, but next year at this time when we're pruning, I'll let them do 2 buds unless the plant is not mature enough. So I'll be showing you some of our plants that we have already trimmed, and I'll show you what we're doing on 2 of the plants here in just a minute. Now remember what I said in the in that first video. That first video I mentioned, if you take 12 grape growers, bring them in a room, ask them a question, ask them 2 or 3 questions, you're going to get 13 answers. There's just no easy way of getting consistency on grape growing. So we've got a very dry climate. Last summer we had temperatures into the 110 range for weeks at a time. So I'm different than what you would see in the cold weather climate growers. Those guys deal with different issues and different problems and different pests than we do here. So once again, if you watched our video from last year, you'll know that we have a VSP system, or a mid-wire cordon training system. Using that training system, we will bring the plants up to the fruiting wire and then create a cordon. Now, last year in my video that I talked about, there were 5 options. One option was completely replace the plant. When we got to that plant, if the plant didn't grow, replace the plant. So that's an easy one. Last year I ended up having to replace, I think we replaced 5 plants, which was pretty good because the rest of them grew up. Option number 2 would be to cut the plant completely down, back down to the graft union, and have it start over again. And we did have several plants this year that did that, and I'll be showing you that with the showcase vines. Option number 3 of the 5. Number 3 would be to cut the plant right at the fruiting wire. It wasn't big enough. I didn't really get some good pencil width cordons coming out of that plant for the year, or pencil width shoots. So I cut the plant right at the fruiting wire. There was probably, I would say, more than 1/3 of the plants I cut right at the fruiting wire in hopes I would get 2 shoots coming out for the cordons. And most of them did. There were some that didn't meet that, but we'll deal with that this year. Option number 4 now. Option number 4 was to have the plant grow up, and last year, if it gave me a good pencil width shoot that went up above the top catch wire, then I took that and laid it down, become one of my cordons. So I had probably, I think, a little less than 1/3 of them. I actually had a shoot that came up that I could lay down as a cordon in hopes that a shoot will come out the other side to give me the second cordon for that plant. And then the fifth option's easy. And I had quite a few plants, and I'm not going to say 1/3, it was a little less than 1/3 of those, probably 25%. I was able to train 2 cordons from the previous year. So I had the plant come up, 2 cordons, and I laid them down. And I'm going to show you all of this in here with the showcase vines. So let's take a look at my showcase vines that we showed in that video last year. And I've already cut them. They're already cut and waiting for bud break. So let's take a look at each one of these. Let's take a look at the showcase vines from last year. We had 4 vines that we were using last year as our showcase. And if you haven't seen that video, you can take a look at it. I'll put a link here for you to go take a look at the video. But it makes a very dramatic presentation in showing you the difference between these vines in this kind of environment. Last year, this vine was cut all the way down to the scion, to the graft union, and I told it to start over the year. I had this one start the year over all over again, and it grew up, gave me a nice shoot all the way across, and from that I'm going to be able to use this as a cordon this year. I was hoping to get a bud out of right here this year, but the bud that actually grew out of here only came out about a couple inches, so I cut that off. So this has already been trimmed. Now the other thing I'm doing is, because this is a 2-year-old Cabernet Sauvignon going into its 3rd year. Last year we did not allow fruit to develop on these vines. This year we can let fruit develop, but typically you put 2 spurs on each one of your 2 nodes on each one of your spurs. I didn't do that. I only have 1. I have 1 node on each one of these spurs, and the reason I have 1 is I only want a couple clusters out of each spur, as opposed to 4 clusters. I want the plant to spend time building its trunk, building the root system, building up the overall health of the plant, as opposed to trying to grow more grapes this year. In the 4th year, 2 years from now, we should have, or next year, we should have quite a few grapes out of this particular one. So this was option 1, where we started brand new last year and had it grow up and become a very nice cordon for us. Let's take a look at vine number 2. Again, this is a Cabernet Sauvignon vine. Last year, this vine grew up, and you can see this is last year's growth with new clean bark. Last year we brought it and I cut it right there. This was only right to the pruning wire in hopes of getting a couple of the buds to give me a nice cordon. So during the year, I trained this particular shoot that way, I trained that shoot that way, and it gave me a really nice little cordon on both sides. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 on that side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on that side. That one's a little shorter over there. So this was option number 2. Take a look at what it looked like last year at the end. It had been cut right at the fruiting wire, and I let it grow this year and trained shoots to come down to be my cordons. In our little showcase here, this is number 3. Now this is a Grenache vine, 2 years old. Last year when we were here at this time pruning, this vine actually had 2 shoots that split off from it at the beginning of the year last year. So what I did was I actually laid down 2 cordons from the shoots that I got the previous year, which was 2 years ago, and gave it a really nice cordon on both sides. Now you can see the rough bark. This is a 2-year-old vine. All of this was up there. I trimmed it back to 1 bud. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9. So I've got 9, I've got 8, 16 shoots, 1 bud, as you can see. I've knocked it down to 1 bud, so I get 1 shoot coming up. I'll probably get a base bud out of these as well, and I may keep those base buds, but I do know that the base buds will not fruit. There's no fruit coming out of the base buds, only out of the fruiting buds. So take a look at what this looked like last year. This was essentially 2 cordons that I tied down last year, and you can see that it did a very nice job growing this year. I've got a good trunk on this after 2 years. This is 2 years of growth going into our 3rd year. This is our last vine in the showcase. This is again a 2-year-old Grenache vine. Last year, when you look at the pictures I'll show you in a second, I brought this up and I had 1 cordon going to the left and I didn't have anything going to the right. I was able to get a shoot out of one of the buds this year that I was able to lay down as my cordon going forward. So I've got a very nice shoot here. This is a 2-year-old vine going on its 3rd year. Again, I've limited to 1 bud per spur all the way through. I only want a little bit of grapes. I don't want to overload the plant for its 3rd year of growth. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Again, I've got about 16 spurs coming off of this. So this plant did really nicely, as you can see on the size. I think we're doing really well. Now, as you can see, those 4 vines are my showcase vines. Hit all 4 of the options, not replacing them, but the first one came up. I cut it at the graft union. It grew up and it gave me a nice cordon this year. I don't have a second cordon, but hopefully I'll get one this coming year. The second option, which is the one I cut right at the fruiting wire, got 2 cordons. The third one is the one with both cordons from last year. That one is looking really nice. And then the 4th one was the one where I laid down 1 cordon and I got the second cordon. So all 4 of those plants did really well. So let's go up into the vineyard here and take a look at the last 2 plants that I have. That one had cordons both directions. No, I think one I cut right at the top and one had a cordon I laid down. So 2 different options. So let's take a look at those and trim those up. These are the last 2 vines that we have to prune this year. I came through and did some pre-pruning through all the vines. We have about 400 vines, and this particular one is a Grenache vine. So we did some pre-pruning and cut it to the catch wire. And last year, when we pruned this vine, we pruned it right at the fruiting wire. We trimmed it at the fruiting wire in hopes that I could get 2 cordons come out during the year, which I was able to do. I was able to train a couple of cordons. These are only 1-year vines. So now I need to set up for next year. Remember, these are 2-year-old vines going into their 3rd growing season. And the type of pruning I'm doing, most of the time you want to prune your spurs so that you have 2 buds per spur. It's only the 3rd year. Last year we restricted the growth. We cut all of the fruit off, so we didn't have any fruit from this vine last year. This year we're going to get fruit, but I don't want to overstress the plant because it's a new plant. So we have 2 buds here, 2 buds there. Instead of doing 2 buds, we're actually only going to do 1 bud on each spur. And I'm going to make sure that the spurs are about hand width apart and get rid of spurs that are not going up, as you can see. So let's start doing this. Let's start pruning the Grenache grapevine. For all the vines I did this year, I always started in the middle and worked my way out. So I kind of take a look at it. This one's going up. There's 1 bud right there. I'm going to cut it just above a bud, and there's a base bud right there, and a base bud right there, and a base bud there, which will grow out this year. When you take a look between this one I'll use as a base bud, I'll use it next year as a spur. So when I take a look at my hand width apart, this one back here, I'm going to get rid of. I've got 1 spur here. I've got 1 spur right there. Hand width apart, this one I'm going to get rid of. Hand width apart. I've got a bud right there, and I got a base bud right there. I've got a little one back here. And this one is real small. I don't know if it's going to make it or not because it's smaller than pencil width, but I'm going to leave it there because I've got a base bud and a fruiting bud on this one. Got the one going sideways, 1 bud, sideways, 1 bud. And then I'm going to get right here to this one, sideways. It's a little too long, and I'm going to cut it, have it end right there at the post. So on this half of this Grenache vine, I've got a couple of base buds right there, a base bud and a fruiting bud. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So next year when I come through this, I should have 9 good spurs coming up that I can work with. So now let's go ahead and tie this down. So I want to train this so that it's right across the top of the wire. I'm not going to wrap it around the wire because I don't want to have problems later, but with this type of I'm going to cut this off. I don't like how close it is to this post. I've got a bud right here that might come up, so I'm going to cut that off right there, and that's it. So that's that half of the Grenache grapevine. So let's do the other half of this grapevine. It's going to be a little more difficult than that one, because that one was pretty easy. But I've got a base bud right there, and I've got a spur right there. I've got one going straight up here. I've got one going straight up here. Got it wrapped around. I've got one going up right there. These are awful close together. I don't like how close together they are. But what I'll do is, next year I'll determine what I want to do with this half of the grapevine. I've got a bud there, and I got a bud down here. I probably won't let the ones in the middle grow as much. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've got 9 on this side. So I've got 9 over there, 9 over here with 1 bud. So that should work out pretty balanced for this plant. I'm going to tie this down now. This always gets difficult because what I'm doing is there's a curve in it. So I'm trying to work around not having a curve in the cordon next year. I'm trying to tie this down pretty tight. So this is the final look for this particular Grenache vine. I've got 9 spurs on each side. I've got a 3-year-old vine. I'm going to limit the number of grapes on it to only 2 clusters, maybe 1 cluster per spur this year. I want it to give some good root growth and trunk and cordon growth as opposed to spending time on the growing grapes this year. This is our last vine of the season. Again, this is a Grenache vine. It's 2 years old. Last year, this one is a little different than the last vine I just showed. In that last year, the trunk came up and it actually had a really nice long shoot that came all the way up and was up above the catch wire. And so what I did was I brought this up and then laid it down as a cordon this past year with the hopes that one of the buds that were here would give me a new cane that I could use for the cordon this year. It did do that, exactly what we wanted to do, so it came out very nice. As you look at the vine, you can see that this is a smooth brown bark, and this is the rough bark, which means this one is 2 years going on. See, it's a 2-year vine, where these are 1-year vine, and this is a 1 year. So they're going to act differently, but you can see I've got some good cordon started in this. Now I'm only going to trim this so that I have 1 bud per spur. The issue is I'm not that educated with this yet. And there's actually a bud right there, a bud right there, and a bud right there. I think this is a fruiting bud right there. I think, but I'm not sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it up high. So this one could possibly have 2 fruiting spurs come off. The same is true for this one. It's got I see 3 buds on it, so I could have 2 fruiting shoots come up. And if that's the case, I'm going to be taking those out when we do shoot thinning. Let me just cut the rest of these. Let's see, that one there, that one there. These are a little close together, but I'm going to let them go for now. White screen. One right there. I got a bud right there, and I got a bud right there. So there's my cordon from last year with the nice set of spurs on top. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spurs on this one. Going over this way, I'm going to take the one off the bottom. I'm going to leave 1 spur on there, 1 spur over there. So that one's all trimmed up and ready to go. So let's tie this one down. I'm going to put a little one right there, put one here, put one there, and out here at the end. So now that one lays across the top of my fruiting wire very nicely. This one here, we'll do the same thing. Turn this up a bit. Now, the issue I have with this is the cordon from the grape on the other side and the cordon from this one. So the issue I have, as you can see, I have the cordon coming up, the new cordon from this year, and it's overlapping the grapevine to the right here. And I put the end there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out where the middle is. So the middle is about right here. So I'm going to cut that off, and I'm actually going to cut this one off. So now they've got almost a hand's width apart. And I've got a nice little even grapevine ready for this year. So one last thing, I'll show you some of the vines. We've already trimmed all of the vines. We've put them up onto the catch wires, onto the fruiting wire, and take a look at these. Take a look at this particular vine here. This is a 2-year-old Grenache vine that grew pretty aggressively. Last year when I trimmed this vine, it came up and it had a nice cordon that we created last year in hopes that I would get a shoot coming out this year, or this past year, which I did. So by doing that, you can see that I have a nice setup going into its 3rd year. As I was saying, these are Grenache vines. Now, this is 2nd year growth going into the 3rd year. Last year we limited how much growth we wanted on these vines, so we didn't really pull very many grapes off. This year, going into its 3rd year, we again don't want a lot of fruit, but I want it to start producing fruit for me. So typically, when you look at a spur, these spurs are typically trimmed with 1 bud, or I'm sorry, with 2 buds on each spur. I'm only putting in 1. See, there's 1 bud there, there's 1 bud there, there's 1 there. As you can see, these all have only 1 bud on them. By putting 1 bud, I'm going to limit the shoots, how many shoots are coming up, and how many grapes this vine produces. I'm going to force it to produce about half as many grapes as it typically would produce at full production. However, because this is only our 3rd year of growth, what we're doing is each one of these has 1 bud on each one. So these spurs are only going to have 1 shoot come up and maybe a couple clusters of grapes. I don't want to overstress these plants as they're trying to mature. Now, when you look at these closer, this is a bud, there's a bud, and there's 1 down there. That base bud will probably come up, and this will probably come up. I'm not sure if these are going to be any fruit on those, but this one right here definitely will have fruit. This is a fruiting bud. These down here are base buds. If they do come up, I'm probably going to leave them and let those base buds grow. I might even use those as my spurs for next year, but I'm going to let it go until we get to the point of shoot thinning, and then we'll take a look at that. So for pruning, that's what we're doing. That's what this little vineyard is doing for the year and getting ready for 3rd year of growth. All of the vines look pretty good. There's a few that are still, I'm going to say, in their 1st year of growth, so we're not going to push those. Some are not bad. I refer to them as my adolescents, my teenagers, and my adults. When people ask me about them, I always refer to them as 3 different versions or 3 different stages, and that gives you a good idea of where we are with all this. So I want to thank you for joining us. Going into our 3rd year of growth, this is pretty exciting. We'll be doing some winemaking later on in the year, so stay tuned. So hope everybody enjoyed this video. Please go ahead and click subscribe, join us, follow us, and let's see what the rest of this year is going to bring us. So again, this is Jeff here at Gavilan Hills Vineyard at Paradise Ranch. We're out.